up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today we're reviewing A Quiet Place Part 2. This film came out yesterday and was directed by John Krasinski and stars Emily Blunt and Cillian Murphy. Now before we start, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe with the post notification bell so you can know if a free video, and let's just start. Let's start talking about the good. So all the actors and actors in this film, I thought they're all fantastic, especially John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, Cillian Murphy, Millicent Simmons, Noah Jupe, and Jimon Hunsu. They are very, very good in this film. The opening sequence is fantastic. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but it sets up something very, very, very well done in this film. And it is sort of a backstory sequence, but I'm not going to spoil what it is. But that sequence is very, very well done. The first act of the film. Now, the first act of the film, where they're setting up the characters, setting up basically the plot of the film, what's going on in the film, is very, very great. So Cillian Murphy has ties to Emily Blunt and the kids, and it's used in a way that is very different. This is a very, very different film than the first one. This one is definitely much bigger than the first one, and that opening sequence and the first act of the film with Cillian Murphy's character is very well done. The second act of the film. Now, the second act of the film is where things start to happen. Characters start finding things, and they find things that help them along through the story. And the second act of the film does a very good job in setting things up for the third act of the film. The second act of the film is obviously mostly the first and second acts of this film is mostly setup, but the second act of the film delivers a lot of backstory for one character, and I'm not going to spoil who it is, but the backstory sequence is very well done. And when you actually see the character in real time in this film, it's awesome. You have two characters who are lead characters in this film. One of them not so much, but the other one, yes. And the second act of the film is technically focusing on those two characters, of course, with Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, and Noah Jupe's character. But the second act of the film does a very good job in developing the story and continuing the story for these new characters in this film. The cinematography, which of course includes the shots, the camera angles, the lighting, is fantastic. This is a very, very good looking film. John Krasinski is by far one of the best horror directors of the past decade, and it shows in this film because every single sequence is tense, and I'll talk about that later, but every single sequence is shot in a way that you see different things that are happening in the background, but it's focused on the characters, but the monsters are always there, and the monsters look fantastic once again in this film. Just everything about them, the CGI, everything looks very well done in this film. The score. Now, the score is fantastic. It's kind of like the first film. Some of the score in the first film is used in this film, but a lot of it is different. And especially during those tense sequences when the score builds up, it was awesome. You can feel the tension between the characters, and you can feel that some danger is near them, and the score just enhances the overall experience for this film. The sound design. Now, the sound design, once again, is phenomenal. Just like the first film, of course, it's a quiet place, so, it's pretty quiet in the entire film. But this film uses it in a way that's similar to the first film, but it's very different. When things start to happen and it focuses on Millicent Simmons' character, just like the first film, you don't hear anything, and it adds a lot of tension to this film because clearly she doesn't know what's going on. She sees it, but of course she can't hear it. So it's very, very tense, since this film is technically focusing on her character the most, of course with Noah Jupe's character and Emily Blunt, but her character is the main focus of this film. The suspense, thrills, and jump scares were delivered perfectly. Now, the first film had not that many jump scares, I would say, but the thrills and suspense was perfect. This film, once again, has perfect jump scares, perfect thrills, perfect scares, and there are more jump scares in this film than the first one. But in this film, it's not just constant jump scares, they're earned. The jump scares are earned. It's the music starts to creep up and nothing happens, and then of course something happens in another sequence. But this film does feel like a sort of feels like a Steven Spielberg film. This film looks very well done, and just different things that happen in this film to the characters and with the monsters and all that stuff. It feels like a Steven Spielberg film. So uh, props to John Krasinski, who I think he did take some inspiration from Steven Spielberg. So he is now one of the best horror directors of the past decade. The third act of the film is very, very intense. The third act of the film is, of course, that final battle. Well, I guess we could call it final battle, but Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, um, Millicent Simmons, Noah Jupe, and Jimon Hunsu. The third act of the film is focused on those five characters. Things happen to the characters that are unexpected, and different characters um, go through things that are very tense and very creepy and scary. And the third act of the film is action packed. And something happens to one of the characters, well, two of the characters, but one in particular, one of the main characters, something happens to that character, which is very, very gruesome for this type of film, for a PG-13 horror film. So I thought that that John Krasinski did a great job with those sequences in this film. And the third act of the film is awesome. It's action packed, and I would say that the third act of this film is better on an action level than the third act of the film in A Quiet Place 1. But I would say that A Quiet Place 1's third act is more emotional than the third act in A Quiet Place Part 2. And the ending sequence. I thought the ending sequence was great. It works perfectly for the film, and it sets up something that, once again, could be a great sequel. So I hope they make a third one. But the ending sequence is very, very well done. That's about it. There's no bad about this film. A Quiet Place Part 2 is a phenomenal sequel. It is definitely right on the level of its predecessor, and I highly recommend it. And I'm going to give A Quiet Place Part 2 an A. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe with post notification bell so you can know if I have a video. I'm Peter. Thank you for watching.